Thank you. Appreciate it.
Protecting First Amendment rights of military chaplains. Next on DC Breakdown. Changing guidelines has had a direct impact on what some are calling a suppression of religious freedoms throughout the armed forces. Reverend Counsel Nedd of Project 21 says you might even call it an assault on God by the military. Good to have you joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me on.
So tell me, first of all, you're considered a chaplain, right?
Well, I'm actually a priest and a bishop, but I used to have direct oversight of our military chaplains.
Okay, so explain to me the role of a military chaplain.
Well, the role of the military chaplain is sort of several-fold. Their primary responsibility is literally caring for the religious needs of the military, the soldiers, airmen, etc. But then beyond that, it's also sort of a role of a counselor. And being there for people in need, whatever the crisis happens to be.
So where would you find a chaplain? Would you find them on the battlefield? Would you find them in the hospitals? Tell me where.
You would find them in the battlefield, you would find them in the hospital, you'd find them on military bases. They could be doing things like leading the Sunday services, but also that, they might be spending time in a military hospital. But they also could be on the battlefield or on a battleship. Literally wherever there are troops, there's usually a chaplain there to tend to the spiritual needs of the military personnel.
And the chaplain to tend to the spiritual needs, is it always a Christian?
No, it isn't always a Christian. Obviously, I'm a Christian. Our military chaplains are Christian, but they're Jewish chaplains, Muslim chaplains. I'm told now there's even officially an atheist chaplain. I don't know exactly what that means.
So who gets called up? Who gets called up to duty to handle, this group of young men and women?
Well, it could be anybody. So chaplains are sort of, if you want to think of it this way, it's sort of cross-disciplinary. Because chaplains, the job of the chaplain isn't to proselytize on their specific faith. It's to sort of provide for the spiritual needs of the individual. If you are a Christian chaplain and you're talking to a Christian, then you've got a little bit more flexibility in terms of what you can say and what's appropriate under the circumstances.
So tell me, what's going on now? We have House Resolution 343 that we're dealing with. Tell me about that.
Okay, so there's a bill, H.R. 343. It was introduced by Congressman Walter Jones from North Carolina. And, I spent 20 years working in Washington. And, Walter Jones is probably the sweetest, most dedicated man of faith in the Congress that I've ever seen. So let me just put that out there. But, he's a sweet guy and he's driven by his conscience. And he put forward this piece of legislation because there was a situation in the military where Christian chaplains were being restricted and that they were no longer able to pray in the name of Jesus.
When did this happen?
Oh, okay, so there's been sort of this slippery slide that's been going on for about the last 20 years or so. So here we are today where things are popping up like this, and 10, 15 years ago you thought, well, I never would have imagined that chaplains aren't allowed to pray in the name of Jesus. But literally there's been this slippery slope. There have been a couple of military chaplains who were thrown out of the military for insisting on praying in the name of Jesus.
So thrown out as in goodbye.
Yes. Yeah, so they were court-martialed and then removed from the military. So he put forward this piece of legislation that says that military chaplains should be permitted to pray according to their conscience. And that's literally all his legislation says. And he's been introducing this bill now for 10 years, and it's not really gotten any gravity. It seems like a no-brainer. If you're a Christian and a Christian chaplain is there with you on a battlefield or in some sort of scenario, whatever it is. But the chaplain, who's an officer, who's a professional, who's well-trained, should be able to pray according to his conscience, not as the government sees fit.
So is the issue that if you're praying with a group of troop members,
right,
and not all of them are Christian, is that where the hitch in the giddy-up is?
That's part of the problem, but that's not really the problem so much. So they put this broad regulation in place, and it makes sense under that scenario to some extent, in my opinion. But that's not the issue. It's a one-in-one scenario where those regulations that say you can't pray in the name of Jesus affects my individual relationship with this particular soldier or airman.
So wait a minute.
Yes.
if I'm the soldier,
Right.
and you and I are having a one-on-one,
Right.
you can't say in the name of Jesus.
No, I can't say in the name of Jesus. And so also the bigger problem with this is that these sort of regulations only affect Christians. Jewish chaplains, Muslim chaplains, whatever other chaplains there are, aren't restricted in how they're able to pray for their troops. Restricting the name of Jesus only affects Christian chaplains, obviously.
But in this H.R. 343, it does not specifically mention in the name of Jesus.
No, it does not. It says that a chaplain should be able to pray according to their conscience.
So in other religions, let's say we talked about Judaism, Islam, there's nothing that circles back around to a phrase like in the name of Jesus.
No, it's unique to Christians. And that's the problem, because again, Christians are the only ones that are affected by this, and the fact is also that Christians are the majority in the United States military.
So you've said that this bill for the past 10 years, I
Right.
think this representative has been trying to get some traction on this. Do you think he'll have any better luck today?
Well, I think so. I think the mood's changing a little bit in Congress. He's been fighting this battle for a long time, and he pushed it so hard 2 Congresses ago that they stripped him of all his committee assignments. I mean, he really pushed his issue.
But there are so many. I mean, the House is run by the Republicans.
Right.
And there are so many who are Christians.
Right.
Why aren't they coming on board to help their
Well, that's the part I
fellow?
don't understand, because again, if you claim to be a Christian and a conservative, and often cases that's a Republican, this seems like a no-brainer, but for whatever reason it's not. He gets a certain amount of co-sponsors every year for his legislation, but it never really seems to move. And, I think there's a problem with that. And as somebody, as a man of faith, as a person who, before I became the Archbishop, I was the bishop and I had responsibility for our military chaplains, I'm personally invested in this and the outcome of this legislation.
And I'm assuming that you're hearing from people who are serving in the military, from the troops,
Right.
the Christian troops in particular, that they are offended by this as well.
Yeah, I don't know, offended in some cases, yes, but again, it's just, why are, again, people talk about Christian persecution and it doesn't exist. Well, I would argue that it does exist. Because again, only Christians are being adversely affected by this particular military regulation that restricts how people of faith can pray.
And it's been like this for forever.
It's for about a good 15 years.
Okay. All right. Well, this is an issue. Thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Thanks so much for having me on.
That we're going to, stay on top of, and we'll have you back to, as hopefully as things move forward the way you would like for them to. Reverend Counsel Nedd of Project 21, thank you so much.
Thanks so much.